Let's get going then, because I know we've all got a lot to say and a lot to talk about. So thanks so much everyone for joining us today. I know it's lunchtime, and I know that it's a time that a lot of people choose to work out, or some of you are probably stuck with homeschooling. So we do appreciate that your time is precious. So thanks so much for joining us. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping, which is just on the next slide, please, Jem. So we've just got a couple of bits and pieces that this is being recorded, so just to let everybody know, just in case they've got any problems with that. We really do appreciate your participation. Hopefully that's why we're all here, is to share. So please put any questions in the chat box. We will be launching a couple of polls, and they are confidential, so please feel free to vote as you see fit. We do have captioning on. You can turn it off if you prefer, or you can change the size if you have that functionality, and you will only have that functionality, we worked out yesterday, if you were on a laptop or a PC. If you're on an iPad, you will only have the option to turn it on or off. So you can change the size. To do that, you go to the More setting, and then there'll be an accessibility and subtitles option there. And there will also be a transcript of this event available if anybody would like it. And any questions at any time, you can always email me as well. So just to get started, we'd like to kind of have an understanding of, you know, why you're here really. So hopefully you can all see a poll on the screen. So I'd just like to understand, what is your role within D&I at the moment? So if you could vote on that. So the first option is all or the majority of my role is involved in D&I. A small part of my role involves D&I. My role doesn't involve D&I, but I have a keen interest, or just curious and would like to know more. Oh, you're all really quick at voting. Well done, everyone. Just give it another couple of seconds. Only 87% have voted. That looks like almost everybody has voted now. That's really helpful. So the out and out winner is that most people here do work within, or the majority of their role is within D&I. So that's really helpful to know. I've just shared the results. I hope you can see those. Okay, so now we know why you're here. Let's explain why we are here, and just tell you a little bit about how these came about. So my name's Nikki Dallas, and I'm the director of Talent FM. So Talent FM Executive Search, we recruit into the facilities management sector. Facilities management has always been quite a diverse sector, in that it covers quite a lot of areas, from hard FM to soft FM. Anyone who's on the call who works in FM will know what I'm talking about. But over the past few years, I've got more and more interested in non-biased hiring methodologies, and I've created a product called Zodiac, which I use with my clients, which really it's all about, you know, getting the right person in the right role, the right fit, which is so important. And we do that through a number of different screenings, but by a lot of you know, psychometric assessments. So we're basically putting the right person in the right role, and that's something that I've been doing with my clients with my day job hat on, if you like. I've always been really passionate about gender equality, and more recently my clients have been coming to me asking for more gender balanced shortlists, and that's something that I found a real interest in doing over the past few years. But even back before that, I was a member of the founding committee of Women in FM, which is a special interest group that sits within, at the time it was the British Institute of Facilities Management. It's now the Institute of Workplace Facilities Management, and it felt quite revolutionary what we were doing a decade ago. And although looking back, and you know, with hindsight, really, should it have been that revolutionary? It should have been standard, but you know, we all learn as we go on our journey. My personal journey, I think, is probably a bit more interesting to you as to why I'm here, and why we've launched these webinars. So obviously I've got this real interest in, you know, with my day job, but last year was quite an interesting year for all of us, obviously with the pandemic, but obviously there was a lot going on with regards to Black Lives Matter and a lot of race issues in America, and I know that Gemma's going to talk a little bit more about this. But I'm married to a black man, and I have 2 biracial stepchildren, and my stepson, who's 20, had experienced quite a lot of trolling and abuse online, and a lot of the stuff that came up for my husband, I think, was stuff that he hadn't really addressed since childhood. He was brought up in southeast London, which regrettably is where the EDF, the English Defence League, have quite a strong hold. And the things that he remembered, you know, from his childhood, all of this kind of came out for him. And at first it made me very angry, and then it made me really passionate. And I was like, okay, well, you know, what can I be doing? You know, I've got this platform, I've got this interest in this area. What can I be doing that's better? And then coincidentally, I started seeing these posts from the lovely Gemma Williams was posting every day during Black History Month, and her posts were really great. You know, just educating me, you know, making me want to learn more, want to know more, and so on. So I contacted Gemma, and she's very busy with her day job, but we found time when we were allowed to meet in a pub, and it turned out coincidentally we live not too far away from one another, so it was definitely meant to be. And we met up, and we sat and we talked about you know, bias in the workplace, and you know, the challenges within her running you know, an EMEA facilities management portfolio, and what that meant across borders, and so on and so forth. So we basically came up with the idea that we could do more within our industry, but also it's wider than just our industry, because workplace and workspace, it, you know, affects everybody, whatever sector that they work in. So really, we decided that we would create this space. So the idea of this is to share best practice and create a safe space where we can have these long overdue conversations that need to be had, with the aim of improving and making a more equitable workplace, really. So over to you, Gemma, to tell your bit of the story.
Thank you, Nikki. I'll just pop up a slide as well. So I'm Gemma Williams, and I work, as Nikki was saying, across EMEA as a Senior Director in Facilities Management. Now, obviously for me, when the killing of George Floyd actually happened, there was a very long period of time of self-reflection. I know obviously there was a lot of protests, not just here in the US and the UK, but also across the world, and very much within the EMEA region. And for me, it was kind of scratching the surface of how I view myself, what my perceptions are of other people. Do I personally have unconscious bias? And then whether or not I have my own ignorances, before I could go out and start having conversations and enabling a safe space for people to come and ask me questions as well. As Nikki kind of highlighted, I was actually brought up in southeast London, just around the corner from her husband. You can see the serendipitous that happened here. And for me, you know, again, the BNP at the time was probably the biggest racist national party that we had. And I do remember as a child, then marching in Welling. I must have been around about 11 or 12, peeping out on Welling Road, if anyone knows southeast London that well, and being kind of frightened, but also fascinated by what was actually going on. And a lot of that had been from the refugees, the Somalians coming over and actually requiring a place to stay, and they were obviously placed into the area of Woolwich. So for me, just like Nikki, I kind of went back over my childhood, not only just to see if there was some form of unconscious bias from the communities I was brought up with. I was brought up very much in a white community and was a minority, but I never felt like that. And then I started looking at a wider picture, just in respect of, as I said, myself, my children who are mixed race, how they are viewing the world. And then really, what could I do to kind of help support people and educate people that actually there's been some great historians, Black historians and pioneers in the world. And I just wanted to educate. So for Black History Month, I did start to kind of put out some posts about Black pioneers and people who've made history throughout Europe. So it wasn't just about the UK, just to start people to sit back and reflect on actually what a great contribution, you know, our diversity has enabled us to be in this world today. So for me, it is about championing Black history, or people of colour's history, because it isn't spoken about as much as I would like it to be. And it's also kind of, as Nikki was saying, opening up a space for people to ask me questions and for my friends to ask me difficult questions and to get an honest answer from me without it being a berated answer or kind of in a tone in which it comes across as offensive, I think is the best way to put it. So this is really important, and kind of having these kind of monthly talks to kind of really steep into inclusion and diversity, not just from a race perspective. It is something that does run through, you know, our sexuality, gender, culture, and everything else like that, but just also the wider picture I'm very interested in. So that's me.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Gemma. So we were interested, we just got one more quick poll for you, if I could just launch that. Just bear with me 1 second. It doesn't seem to want me to do, oh, here we go. Sorry about that, everyone. So we're just interested in the following questions. So in my organisation, I can be successful as my authentic self. Do you strongly agree? Agree? Neither agree nor disagree? Disagree, strongly agree, or you're just not sure? This one's got a bit more of a mixed response. Just 5 more seconds and then I'll share the results. Okay. Well, that's great that a lot of people agree or strongly agree that they can be, but there are still 20, I'm trying to do maths quickly, 32% of people that neither disagree or disagree with that point. So we thought that was quite an interesting thing to kind of understand, you know, where people are coming from a personal point of view, whether you work in the D&I space or not. So thank you very much for sharing that. So I'd like to introduce our 2 guest speakers today. We've got 2 fantastic women that are talking to us today. So firstly, we've got Helen. Helen is the CEO and founder of Diversely. As an award-winning entrepreneur in the diversity space, she founded the first women's career platform in the Middle East, hopscotch.work, in 2016, which grew to a worldwide community of over 80,000, working with businesses like Facebook, MasterCard and Nestle, and expanding to Singapore in 2018, where she now lives. To scale the impact of her work, Helen joined renowned tech startup accelerator program Antler in January 2020, and the idea for Diversely was born. Joining forces with her Diversely co-founder and CPO, Hayley Backer, in April of the same year, the vision for the company is to reduce workplace bias for all those from underrepresented groups, not just women, but by creating a scalable global solution through the use of AI-driven tech. The company successfully completed its pre-seed round in November of 2020 and has a 5-strong team working to deliver online solutions for its clients in beta, with a full launch expected in Q2 of this year. And Maria is Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Manager at HS2. So Maria was national winner of the Ready to Startup UK Disabled Entrepreneur Award in 2010 and 3 times winner of Unlimited's Millennium Awards for Social Entrepreneurs. She was Vice Chair of Community Disability Engagement Group at London 2012 and co-founded Sisters of Frida, a cooperative of disabled women and allies. In 2019, Maria was listed as one of the Power 100's most influential disabled people in the UK and is currently shortlisted for Diversity Role Model of the Year with the British Diversity Awards. Maria uses her profile to speak to organisations about the benefits of inclusion and inclusive leadership. And Maria works as EDI Workforce Manager with HS2, supporting the human resources function in inclusive recruiting and retention. So thanks very much for joining us, and over to Helen first.
Hello, and thanks so much, Nikki and Gemma as well, for that really insightful introduction. Nikki, obviously you and I have spoken previously, and I do have an insight into your story, but it was great just to hear that in a little bit more detail. And Gemma, I find the questions that you were asking yourself to be really fascinating, and just, again, an incredible insight into what's happened, I guess, over the last year from your perspective, from someone who it potentially genuinely could affect. As Nikki said, my name's Helen McGuire, and I wanted to speak a little bit about my journey in D&I and why I've come to this place that I have in terms of finding a scalable solution to the issues of bias in the workplace that affect not just women, not just Black people, not just people of colour, but people from an age perspective, from a background perspective, a privilege perspective, and of course people with disabilities, amongst many others that are underrepresented in the workforce. I got into the space of diversity and inclusion almost completely by accident, I would say. My background is actually in comms. I'm originally from the UK and worked for 10 years at the BBC. And when I moved over to the Middle East in 2012 and had my first child, I realized very quickly that the opportunities for women, particularly when they dropped out of the workforce to have children or perhaps to move with a partner to the Middle East, were very, very limited. This was around 2014, 2015. I was very lucky to be working in advertising at that point for an international advertising agency. And the issues weren't necessarily affecting me personally, but were definitely affecting those of my colleagues, friends I had at the time, and of course, other women that I met through baby groups and other interest groups during that period. I remember specifically walking into a photography lesson. I decided to use some of my maternity leave to brush up on my photography skills. And when the tutor asked the people in that class, most of whom were women and mostly slightly older than me, I would say at that point, they all replied with, well, you know, yes, I used to be in X, Y, and Z, HR, PR, legal, whatever it was, but now, you know, I'm just a mum. And I'm here because I really don't have a great deal else to do with my time, you know, and that really hit home for me, that there were so many talented women, specifically in the Middle East at that point, who were simply not getting the professional opportunities that they were due, that they'd studied for and that they'd worked really hard for throughout their careers previously. The journey really went from there. I set up Hopscotch within about 6 months of that experience, after doing a lot of due diligence and research and so on. And we started quite small. I had no idea what the response would be in the region, even though, you know, I knew it was a needed solution from a business and a female perspective. It wasn't like anything else that was happening at that point in the Middle East. And as Nikki rightly said, we grew to a community of over 80,000. I work with some of the biggest household brands that you could probably name off the top of your head. And we experienced quite a lot of success. And I moved the business over to Singapore in 2018, where I moved with my family. You can see it's very dark outside here, so we're in quite a different time zone to most of you guys. And I became increasingly disillusioned with the solution that I'd built. The reason for that was that, number one, it was only dealing with the issue from a woman's perspective. Clearly, we were sitting essentially in the branches of the problem and really not getting to the roots of the issues around why women were not getting these opportunities in the first place with businesses. Secondly, we were really only scraping the surface. You know, the solution as it stood was not particularly scalable. It was only helping a handful of women on a monthly basis. That was not what I set out to do or what I set out to achieve. And I was just becoming increasingly frustrated with what I'd built. I knew that it just wasn't solving the problem, and that was really not the point for me. So as Nikki said, I joined a tech startup accelerator called Antler at the beginning of last year with this problem in mind of, I guess you would say, providing relevant opportunity where possible to all skilled people out there, no matter what their background, no matter what their skin color, no matter what their age or ability, from a PWD perspective. And it was a tough task. I knew that I didn't have the full skill set to solve this problem, because the problem really was something that required a tech solution, was something that required AI and machine learning in order to get to the roots of it. And I needed to find a co-founder in order to help me do that. And I needed to come up with the actual solution itself. I'm glad to say that is something that I managed to get to over the last 12 months. And Diversely was born in about May of last year. We incorporated in Singapore in July of last year. I'm working with my co-founder, Hayley, as Nikki mentioned. Hayley is our tech brain. She is our product brain. She is the MD or former MD of Girls in Tech here in Singapore. She has a financial engineering background, so you can see how she kind of fits into the picture. And to give you a very quick overview of what Diversely is and why we've created it, Diversely is a set of bias-free hiring tools that's powered by AI in order to help businesses to reduce the bias in their hiring processes. That essentially looks like a set of tools which sits on a platform that businesses can subscribe to on a monthly or yearly basis. And it consists of several different things, and I can go into further details about this for sure, but just to give you a very quick overview, the first point is understand where you're at from a diversity perspective. And I know Nikki has very kindly shared our Diversely score and report. It's super quick, it doesn't require any special data, it just means that it gives you an overview of where you are perhaps lacking in diversity in your company, gives you an overall benchmark score and a report that's all automatically generated once you fill out the 5-minute survey. From there, and that's a very important step because we think that tracking and data and analytics are super important to solving this problem. You can then reframe your job adverts and take biased language out of those adverts so that the language becomes more inclusive and more targeted to the types of people that you want to attract within your organization. It also helps you with the structure of that job advert. You can then post that out to a number of different platforms, job boards, LinkedIn, Monster, Indeed, and a lot of niche job boards. And all of the applicants come back into your account completely anonymized, which again, I think is something that we all recognize can be bias inducing. And then once you've done that, you get your ranked list of applicants that you can then download, interview, put into your own systems and so on. So these tools are really kind of built to get to the root of the problem of unconscious bias in the hiring process, and they're designed to take the heavy lifting off businesses, off HR leaders and people, and to integrate within processes. We're in beta now, as Nikki said, so they're open for trial if anybody would like to try them. So that's a kind of very, in a nutshell, history of how I got into and why I got into diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and how I'm trying to help solve the problems.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Helen, for sharing that. I know that Craig, I don't know if Craig's on the call, but he put a question to you, Helen, and perhaps Maria, if you could also answer on this. So this is from Craig McDonald, who is Service Strategy Manager at Cisco within Facilities Management. So he said, whilst I fully embrace the corporate messaging around teams, trust, engagement, etc., I would be interested to hear the panel's thoughts on how the lens changes when moving from macro to micro, from organisations to teams. What works at the team layer when we want to shift the needle from inclusion to belonging? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting point. I think, and I have been asked a similar question before, actually. Belonging really comes from inclusion. And I think, Craig's right that it needs to start at the top. You need to see the behavior modeled from a senior leader perspective for sure. But I think once you get down into the individual person or the team within that organization, there are very, very many ways in which you can foster a sense of belonging and inclusion within those teams. Talking to some of our clients recently about this, particularly when you're working remotely, I think one of the ways is using tech. So they use something called quizzes, which helps them to make their meetings more fun online. They also, prior to remote work, started a Friday tradition, if you like, where everybody brings in a dish from their own family and their own culture in order to foster inclusion for sure, but also just conversation and understanding, and just having those questions around where different people are from and what their background is, and keeping that out in the open. And I think something that I see that happens here in Singapore, just as part of the regular structure, is every single religious holiday gets one day off. So we're not just celebrating Christmas, we're not just celebrating Eid, we're also celebrating Hanukkah and Diwali and so on. And I think that as well gives people, even if you don't give people a day off, at least celebrate that within your company. So that's quite a good marker and quite a good way to start a sense of belonging for different people, to have a different voice within a team.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Maria, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Yes, I think that it is something that is a journey. It takes a long time. The bringing about belonging really needs to come from all directions, from the top down and from the down up. And I think that it is about trying to achieve a good balance of leadership and initiative. And one of the things that we do at High Speed Chew is to really give a voice to our employees' networks. For example, we have, our gender balance network, our ethnic minority network, the disability network, the veteran network, the parent network. And it's fantastic because you can really pick and choose all of the networks that you want to belong to, and you share and collaborate with others who are like-minded, and we have leadership. People from the leadership come and present our guests. So I think that's one of the ways in which you can really identify with multiple identities, really, because we all wear different hats at different times. So I think that offering that is one way, but there are so many ways in which employers can foster a sense of belonging. But I definitely think that one thing we need to do at work is not just bring our authentic self, but bring our best self. Sometimes our authentic self is not the best. We need to bring the best one. Yeah,
I love that, thank you. Well, that brings us nicely on to what you are doing, HS2, please, Maria, if you could share that with us. We've got a slide that we'll put up for you, and if you can just tell everybody about the initiatives that you're doing at HS2 and a little bit about your story, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so we do a number of things. This is just a very quick overview of some of the most relevant things that we do. So first of all, we really try to take an intersectional approach, because we believe strongly that people wear multiple hats at any different times, and it's important to really try to understand that we are not one homogeneous group. And whether we are women, whether we are ethnic minorities, or we have a disability, we all tick different boxes. And therefore, it's really important to understand that often what includes one category will include the other. So we always need to keep an open mind about that. We are a multiple award-winning employer, EDI award-winning employer, and that's important because although it sounds like it's very much of a, giving ourselves a pat on the back, actually, winning these awards is really important because it brings visibility to what we're trying to achieve, and it attracts a more diverse workforce. Pushing for the awards is not just about saying, oh, we are so good at this. It really is about trying to attract the candidates' attention so that we can really try to change the population of our workforce as much as possible. As you know, HS2 is in construction and engineering, not very much in the railways yet. The railways is being built, but it's not there yet. So it's really, really traditionally not very diverse. So by really striving to apply for awards, we keep attracting diverse populations to us. Also, we have made a point of formally recruiting our recruiting team and hiring managers in inclusive recruiting techniques. We all follow a very strict protocol so that we ensure that we are accountable and that we offer equal opportunities for everybody, and we make adjustments as we go along. The other thing that we do, we have an inclusive and accessible website full of people's stories, people with a disability, women, people who are not traditionally seen as belonging in construction and engineering. We try to feature those stories so that people see that if some of us have done it, then others can do it too. Trying to look at the next, the slide is gone. Sorry, I can't remember on top of my head. So, okay, there it is.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Maria, it just went dark all of a sudden.
Then the other, no problem. The other thing that we do is that we really keep track of people who make requests for adjustments, both at the application stage of when you apply for a job, and then after. We have a formal way of keeping track of adjustments that have been made, and that's really important because, especially for when it comes to disability, making a request of accommodation for disability can make you feel really vulnerable, and it can make you feel really exposed. And so it's really important that this is seen as business as usual, that we make adjustments as a matter of course, and they are not a problem at all. And also that whatever adjustments we made at the beginning of the hiring process, we make sure that we continue doing so later on when we're retaining the employee. And that's really important because that also gives a sense of belonging. For example, I am severely deaf. I have about 90% loss on this ear, and I don't even wear a hearing aid on this side because there's no point. But on this side, I have about 25% hearing, which with a hearing aid can help me a bit, but I do have to use subtitles, for example. So when I apply for a job, there is always a risk element for me in terms of, showing up with a different education. I'm a European, I'm originally from Italy, I have a strong accent, I am deaf, I am a woman. Depending on the certain industry that I'm applying to, of course, I'm going to meet bias, and therefore, by having a structured process in place that makes me feel confident about asking for adjustment, it could be about disability, but it could also be about childcare and having additional responsibilities that you need to fit that recruitment process with your life as much as possible. So it's important to have that in place, and that fosters a sense of belonging. I apologize, my dog is barking in the background. The other thing that we do very quickly, I'm going to try and summarize. We also have a leadership discovery program where we identify talent within the organization, and we really try to equip them with all of the leadership capabilities that they need. And that includes very much equality, diversity, and inclusion, understanding on how to have difficult conversations, how to manage conflicting priorities within your team, especially if you have people who are having to be absent for sickness or for disability or for childcare. How do you manage those within the teams? How do you make sure that everybody feels heard and understood? So we embed all of these EDI competency within the leadership program so that we bring inclusive and well-equipped leaders within our organizations. We also have reverse mentoring. As you can probably imagine, our leadership is not terribly diverse, and therefore we offer them the opportunity to participate in the reverse mentoring, which is a program where they are paired up with a more junior individual from across different sides of the organization. But this person is usually someone of a different gender, someone with a different background. They're possibly from different racial origins, etc. So we try and match the leadership with someone who is very, very different from them, so that there can be a reciprocal learning and exposure to diversity. We also have a clear short program, which is an accreditation program, which helps us track our progress in inclusion according to best practice at national level. And we also have, as I mentioned before, our EDI employee networks. They really help us make sure that we get it right. Whenever we have new policies, we share them with the networks who tell us anything we've missed, etc. And also, we are piloting a new coaching service. You might notice that when it comes to the leadership, especially very senior leadership, the diversity at the top is not as varied as the middle and bottom management and the rest of the workforce. And what happens is when you're recruiting at very senior levels, often the first to drop out are people from ethnic minorities, women, and people with disabilities. It's because often there is a bad design in terms of the recruiting process that forces people to question themselves too much, and they tend to drop off. So what we try to do is to provide some support in terms of a little bit of coaching, so that we address that the people dropping out and increase their chances of actually staying, in the competitive process to reach the senior leadership and avoid talking themselves out. Just to give an example, there is research that shows that often men apply for senior roles when they feel that they have around about 50% of the criteria listed. Women, instead, will apply for a senior role only when they cover 90 or more % of the criteria. And so therefore, in senior leadership, you will have fewer women, fewer disabled people, fewer people from ethnic minorities, because they're talking themselves out of it, because they are so super conscientious, and rather than putting themselves out there, they're questioning themselves. So this is what the coaching is attempting to do. But there are lots of other things that we do at HS2 to really try to bring about a diverse workforce. And it's really important because in construction and engineering, over the next 10 years, 1/3 of the workforce will retire. And therefore, we will have no choice but to really branch out and recruit more diversely if we want to meet the shortfall. So it is not just a good thing to do, it's the business thing to do.
Maria, thanks so much. Sorry, thanks so much for that, Maria. I know when we spoke, you talked about blind auditioning. Can you just explain for those that don't know what it is, how it works, and what your experience of it was like? Because I understand that you went through blind auditioning for applying for your role. So it'd be good to know a little bit more about that. And then I have lots of other questions that have popped up as well. So thanks everyone for being so participative.
Okay. Well, I was really blessed to be able to participate in a blind audition in my organization. I heard that a position had opened up and I wanted to go for it. I wasn't feeling too confident, to be honest. I had considerable experience and a good CV, but I was, I am very conscious, of course, of the fact that my name or my CV is not, it doesn't sound British. I am not British. I have a foreign accent. I am a woman. I have a disability. And therefore, I wondered, will I encounter bias in this process? Especially when it comes to a role in a senior level. You do have your reservations as to whether you're going to make it. And so what happened was that I simply submitted my CV. I went on the website and submitted my CV. And then what happened was I received an email asking me, saying that I basically met the criteria for the job, the minimum criteria, because all the jobs at HS2, we only advertise the minimum criteria. We don't advertise the desirable criteria. And that's really important to help increase diversity. And so having then met the criteria, they said to me if I was interested in submitting my answer to a sort of challenge, I will be given a scenario, I will be given a context. I had to analyze this problem, and then I had to reply within a day, within 24 hours. I would have to reply to this challenge. And this is something that you cannot really Google. You cannot Google it up. You really have to think about how you're going to resolve the problem. And so I did. And then once I did that, I was contacted again, and I was told that I passed to the next stage, whether I was interested in doing another challenge. So I was given another scenario, a problem to solve. And so I really had to put my thinking cap on and try to solve it. And after that, what happened was that I was told I'd been shortlisted. Later on, I went through the interview, and eventually I got the job. But when I received the communication that I'd been offered the job, they said to me, we would like to offer you the job. And it's not because we don't like you, it's because you score the highest. They were trying to convey the fact that the process had been very rigorous, and that really I was in competition against many other very talented applicants. And I found out later that there were lawyers who applied for the job, people who used to work in the Diversity and Equality Commission, people who had been educated in Oxford and Cambridge, which I certainly didn't have. I couldn't aspire to. I graduated in another university. But what gave them the confidence was the strength of my answer and the knowledge, and the fact that even without looking at my CV, the hiring manager could see that I will be someone who will be able to do the job on the basis of my answers. And that was solely based on my ability. So the fact that I'm a woman, that I have a disability, that I have an accent, that I was born in a European country, didn't go against me at all. So I felt that was really incredible, and I'm very proud that I've come from that system, and it is something that we strive to use for as many jobs as possible in HS2. Let me make a disclaimer. It's really important to understand that not all jobs can be designed for blind auditioning. Usually blind auditioning is a very good tool for roles where you have to hire a certain number of people into it. When you have a few more than one, obviously it's not something that will work very well when you are, for example, recruiting for a director or maybe a CEO. When it's that high, you will need to do more than that. But it's still a very, very good tool to really try to give people who are from non-traditional background, give them a fair chance to actually demonstrate that they have the skills and the ability, and seeing that past their gender, the origin, the race, and whatever. So I'm a huge advocate of blind auditioning.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that. I've just got a number of questions that I'd like to go through. This is to the whole panel, please. So Sandra said she'd be interested in the panelists' view about authentic self and how much organisations can really commit to this. Does anyone have a view they'd like to share on that?
Then I just saw the body.
Sorry, I have my son in the background.
That's okay. Homeschooling is fun, isn't it? I said it at the beginning. It's no problem.
I would just want to point on two things. Just number one, the blind auditioning. I actually did that with JLL, and I fantastic way to really exhibit what skills level that you can bring into an organisation. So for me, I think it's great, as you said, you know, senior directors and down, it does give everybody a more fair platform to show what they can bring to a company, and thus obviously have some diversity within the workforce. For me personally, I have found, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
The question was about authentic self and how much organisations can really commit to
Thank
this.
you. For me personally, I do think it's partly to do with the organisation, but also yourself. And if you're comfortable about bringing your own authentic self to work, as I said when I was talking earlier, for me, it was about self-reflection and kind of what type of boundaries I'd placed on myself because I thought that was the best way to be. And that also then imparts into regulating your behaviour. So once you become more comfortable within yourself, then you can show up 100%. And to be honest with you, the company I work for very much embraced that across, you know, their business lines. So for me, I think it does start with you and how comfortable you are so that you can bring your authentic self to work. Most companies will be celebratory about it because they can see that harness of talent. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Nita's asked a question to you, Maria. She'd like to know how you are achieving reverse mentoring. Are junior team members willing to speak up?
Oh, absolutely. The way we run the program is that we advertise it internally, and we say if you feel that you have the skills and ability to offer, to have an equal relationship with someone in the leadership team, you have the willingness to offer constructive criticism and help them and guide them in their journey towards diversity and inclusion. We would like to hear from you, and we are inundated with applications. We have people on our waiting list, but it's fantastic because it has given us an amazing exposure to diversity. And coincidentally, 30% of people of junior mentors who mentor the senior leadership, they've been promoted, and some of them more than once. And I think it's because it gives also more junior people a real insight into the challenges and the difficulties and the responsibilities of being in the leadership. And this is why you gain a much greater understanding of all that, and therefore that sees you really well when you want to progress in your own career. So the benefit goes both ways. And then what happens is, in the end, the senior leadership will have a new mentor every year. And but the people who leave, they stay connected, they become friends. So it is a fantastic way, once again, to be your authentic self at work.
Brilliant. Helen, perhaps this is one for you. This is a question from Peter. He wants to know, how do we drive a greater focus and investment on the use of people metrics, analytics and insight to inform D&I? It is wrong organisations know more about their customers than their people, and yet employees are supposed to be their greatest asset. Obviously, you come at D&I from a tech point of view, so do you have any input for Peter there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to point out that although my current solution is very much on the tech perspective, it comes from that because of 4.5 years spent on ground, you know, with organisations trying to do the right thing, and all the different solutions that I've seen through that period of time. I mean, I completely agree that data and analytics are absolutely fundamental to getting this this issue, if you like, across the line and to making progress on it. And the reason that I think it's important for businesses to understand that is because it's very difficult to sell in the concept of D&I to your stakeholders if it's going to just cost extra money and extra time, and you're not seeing any ROI, and you're not seeing any movement on the bottom line, and you're not seeing any kind of business benefits, let's say, to your strategies. I think that understanding where you start from, understanding what your goals, your KPIs, I mean, in some companies, I know they like to use quotas. I'm not a huge fan, but understanding where you want to get to is definitely a very important part of that. And understanding exactly how your business is performing in terms of the people that you hire, what they're doing within a business, what difference they're making, what they're bringing to the table, and whether that's increasing your bottom line, whether it's increasing your profit, whether it's increasing your sales or product or design or whatever it might be, is super important. I do know of some products out there that are looking at exactly this. If anyone is interested, there's a business called Panalyt, which is Panalyt, which tracks exactly this within an organization. Even looking at things like inclusivity, so who's having conversations with who, who's being left out of those conversations, who's likely to be leaving your organization soon. And I think one of the key benefits of that is to stop that revolving door, right? So the more diverse and inclusive your business is, the more likely it is people will find better relationships in that business, the less likely it is they will either have complaints or that they will leave your business, which is obviously a huge cost to business as well. So there are many different kind of points within that, I think, that you can make a case around for D&I and for belonging as well. And I know just from my own personal experience, whenever I've left a company, the thing that I found very difficult to leave is the people within that company. So get that right, and you're really going to save your business money in the long run as well. So yeah, there are some tech solutions out there that help with this for sure, if that's an approach that people want to take. But I do think data analytics, measurement, tracking, all of that stuff has to be a huge part of what you're trying to do. Otherwise, how do you know whether you're improving it? How do you know whether you're making a difference and what impact that's having?
Yeah, without a doubt, absolutely. James has got a question for the panel. He wants to know how valuable are cultural immersive programs, so time spent understanding other cultures, perhaps working in the community, reverse mentoring. We just talked about reverse mentoring, but perhaps from a diversity point of view. Have the panel got any examples of this working really well?
I can definitely say, having worked outside of the UK in the Middle East and Asia, I have seen businesses do this quite well, because what generally happens, particularly in sort of big international hubs like Singapore and Dubai, for example, is that the majority of your co-workers are not from where you're from. So one of the businesses I worked for in the Middle East, an advertising company, there were 43 different nationalities within that business. So, there's a huge amount of opportunity, but there's also a huge amount of opportunity for miscommunication. And we did speak to several businesses when I was running Hopscotch about that those cultural programs. And we used to get UAE nationals, for example, into companies to help businesses and to help those companies understand cultures and laws of the land, which are very different to elsewhere in the world, even to the point that you do not shake a woman's hand. In the UAE, it's considered very offensive. And if you go into that and from a business context, you could obviously get yourself in some hot water. So I have seen it work quite well. I think it's quite challenging across many, many different cultures. I think you probably need to pick, the most prevalent, perhaps.
I think Helen might have frozen. Or is that just my end? No, so I think we've lost Helen.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're back. Hello, Helen. Sorry, we lost you just that last couple of moments.
Oh no, I just said I think it works well if you focus on one culture at a time. Sure. Don't sort of bombard people with too many different cultures at once, but certainly having a key understanding of the predominant culture is definitely works in my experience.
Okay, Maria, Peter has a question for you. He said, at HS2, how do you measure and monitor the impact and effectiveness of your interventions in terms of creating a more inclusive employment experience, customer experience and business success?
Well, we use an accreditation program called Clear Assured, which measures with specific KPI how we recruit and retain our people, and also what we do in terms of the policies that we have, policies that are, you know, not just up to date, but they are really, really the best that they can be, especially because we are a huge employer. We are going to generate hundreds of thousands of jobs as a result of other, you know, our supply chain, and therefore we really need to walk the talk, and therefore we need to really keep ourselves accountable. And basically the clear assurance system is a system where you have to submit evidence, you have to submit data, you have to measure yourselves against best practice, and that's what we keep doing. We've actually recently, we've been the first to achieve the gold standard and in this clear assurance system, which is an accreditation system. It's not a ranking system.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really important because this is not as simple as stacking organizations against each other on a scale. You know, it really is about you and what you are doing to measure yourself against national global standards actually. So yeah, so that's what we do and how we keep track of ourselves.
Great.
And we are in the process of promoting this supply chain as well.
Oh, it's going to be a next question because Martin asked that question. Martin, so there you go. Maria's answered that for you. He asked, can you share any experience or existing solution that ensures that HS2 supply chains are complying with the Equality Act 2010? So that's your question answered for you, Martin. Hope that's helpful.
I did.
It is incredibly challenging, as you can imagine, because our supply chain is vast. So as far as we are concerned in terms of EDI, we have five of me. So I am dedicated to look after the workforce, for example. There will be a colleague who is dedicated to the work site and the construction site. There is a colleague who is dedicated to the communities that we impact along the route. And there is another colleague who is looking at specifically at the supply chain and making sure that they hold themselves accountable. They don't have to have the same system that we use. Not necessarily everybody has to be clear assured, but they need to adopt in order to be considered to be a supplier. You have to meet certain EDI criteria, and that's where the strength lies, because we have the power to really influence and change the industry. If you don't have enough EDI credential, you will not be able to be a supplier to HS2, and so that's how we try to influence EDI on a national level.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Sorry, Gemma.
Yeah, I was about to say just quickly, Nikki, because I know Helen froze for a minute. I just wanted to add one point onto what she was saying. For me, I think that it's really important for leadership to listen to their employees, especially those that are leading within kind of disability awareness or race, or and they can come up with solutions and training because they can see it from a completely different perspective, from a leadership perspective. And I think as you come together to actually start building that ID strategy, it's really important because it does ensure that employees feel like they belong to the overall business instead of being the employee. So I think it's good when leadership are open to grassroots ideas that come up and can actually support them to become more inclusive and diverse companies. So I just want
and I know that from your experience, Gemma, that's something that you think JLL does very well, and you're very
very well. I mean, we've got the reverse mentoring. You know, it's amazing that it was down to leadership to be able to volunteer themselves, and there were lots of people that did sign up for, you know, race. We call it the necessary reverse, because anyone could mentor anyone, whether they're in a junior position or in a leadership position. But for me, we've done you know, JLL's done a lot to really embody that power into their employees, so they feel that they do have that voice, and in that, it makes you feel that you do belong to the overall strategy for it.
That's fantastic. I'm really conscious of time. I want to thank everybody so much for all your participation. It's been a really interesting conversation. I just wanted to let you know about something that I've just come across on through somebody I've been talking to about these events. Gemma, if you could just share that slide for me, please. So there's an allyship book club on LinkedIn. I don't know if anyone knows about this, but a lovely lady called Chicoray, who unfortunately couldn't be on today's call, runs this allyship book club. And the next book is Trevor Noah's Born a Crime, and the next meeting is on the 8th of February. There's a link there, and also Chicoray's email address if anybody wants to contact her about joining. But I just thought what a lovely thing to be involved in, and hopefully she'll talk to us later in on another event. But I just wanted to let you know that the book club is starting if anybody wanted to join. I know that I'm definitely going to join up, so I'm a big Trevor Noah fan, and just wanted to let you know that these events are going to be monthly events, and they're going to be on the 3rd Tuesday of every month at 4 o'clock. Our next one, we're going to look around unconscious bias in the workplace, and Sasha Scott, who's founder of the Inclusive Group, is going to be talking to us. And then we've got other speakers that we're lining up that are yet to be confirmed. And then on the 16th of March, we're going to be talking more around allyship and LGBTQ+ in the workplace. If you've got any questions about anything today, or if we didn't manage to get around to your question, I'm really sorry about that. We did have a lot of interested parties, so I did try to take a good cross section. Thanks so much for your time. Have a brilliant rest of your afternoon. And if anyone has any questions, drop me a note.